Hello everybody and welcome to video 57. Today we're going to be taking a look at the oral cavity as part of the alimentary canal, as well as taking a look at several of the accessory organs that you have within the oral cavity. So the oral cavity, otherwise known as the mouth, is a hollow chamber where food is going to enter the body. Within it you're going to have the hard and soft palate, your teeth, your tongue, and salivary glands. Both mechanical and chemical digestion are going to take place in the oral cavity, eventually to turn food into what's known as a bolus. So you can see some of the structures here that we're going to talk about with the teeth, the tongue. Most of these you're probably already familiar with, though, located in your mouth. So the roof of your mouth is formed by the hard and soft palates. And so if you feel the top of your mouth, the anterior portion is very, very solid. And that is going to make up the hard palate, while if you go posterior, you're going to feel where it's no longer solid. It's going to be very, very soft. That's going to be the soft palate. The hard palate is because there is actually a bone there, the palatine bone, as part of your skull. And then the soft palate posterior does not have that bone sitting there anymore, and so that is why it is soft. From the soft palate, you're going to have the uvula hanging down from it. The uvula's job is to prevent any sort of food or liquid to move from your oral cavity up to your nasal cavity. The floor of your mouth is going to be made of the tongue and a lot of associated muscles with the tongue. It's anchored to the hyoid bone. You may remember that from the skeletal system. And then it's also attached to the floor of your mouth via the frenulum, that connective tissue between your tongue and the floor of your mouth. On the tongue, you're going to have papillae, or the bumps on the tongue, and then on those papillae, you're going to find taste buds and the sensory receptors from our nervous system unit, you may remember, that are going to be responsible for sensing various things, sodium ions, hydrogen ions, whatever it might be for your sense of taste. Your teeth are responsible for mechanical digestion in the mouth. Mechanical digestion just means you are physically changing something into a smaller proportion of that thing, but it remains the same. When you chew your food with your teeth, that mechanical digestion, it just becomes a smaller particle of food. And so you're chewing it and you're forming a bolus. A bolus is just your chewed up food plus your saliva, and we'll get to your salivary glands here in a second. But you have four types of teeth named based on shape and placement. You have your incisors, 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. Your canines, 2 on top, 2 on bottom. Your premolars, 4 on top and 4 on bottom. And then your molars, and you have 6 of those on top and 6 on bottom. The incisors, their job is to be a very, very sharp cutting edge used to shred food. You see those are very, very large in predators because they need to shred their food. Incisors are sharp in herbivores because they need to be able to shred any sort of greenery that they're eating. Your canines are large in predators because they need the ability to pierce that food. The canines are also known as the cuspids. They have one point essentially to them, is why it's called a cuspid. Your premolars, also known as the bicuspids, because they have 2 points, and your molars are the tricuspids because they have 3 points. Their job is going to be to grind and to crush food, and you kind of move your jaw back and forth on them to be able to grind that food up into very, very small particles. So here you can see the upper teeth in an adult and the lower teeth in the adult. Here in the middle are your baby teeth. So you have 32 adult teeth and 20 baby teeth. The baby teeth will fall out. Eventually they'll be pushed out by the adult teeth as they're coming in. As you probably remember from when you were younger. Over here on this side, you can also see the approximately when things start to erupt. That is when those teeth begin to be visible in your mouth and erupt through that gum line. A typical tooth is going to have 3 parts: the crown, the neck, and the root. And they're going to refer to different areas on the tooth. A crown is the visible portion. It's going to be covered with enamel, the hardest substance in the human body. If you were to go deep to the enamel, you would find dentin and cementum. Cementum is very similar to enamel, but it's going to be responsible for covering the hidden part of your tooth when it's inside your gums. You won't have any enamel on the root of your tooth. Dentin sits underneath the enamel and the cementum, and it's going to run from the neck, which is the area where the tooth meets the gum, down to the root, which again, the root is the hidden part of the tooth that's hidden by the gum. At the center of the tooth is the pulp cavity, which is where you're going to have connective tissue, blood vessels, nerves, anything like that. If you ever bit something that was cold, the sensory nerves in that pulp cavity or sensing the cold temperature. Whenever you lose a tooth, you see it starts to bleed because there are blood vessels that are lacerated there because you lost that tooth. All of that is going to be located in the pulp cavity. And so you can see here the enamel covering the crown, the neck being where it meets, and then the root being the hidden part. You can see the socket of this tooth here because it is a bone to kind of, not really a bone of your tooth, but you can kind of think of it that way. The cementum covering the outside of the root here and the pulp cavity in the middle. You have 3 pairs of salivary glands that over the course of a day will produce about 1 liter of saliva. One of them is going to sit just below and in front of your ear, and the other 2 are going to be located on the floor of your mouth. Saliva is actually primarily water, which is still really good for digesting food and the chemical digestion of food, because when you are chemically digesting something, you're turning it into a different molecule. And so in your mouth with the salivary glands, and specifically salivary amylase inside of your saliva, you're going to get the chemical digestion of carbohydrates. So you're going to turn carbohydrates into its monomer form, which is glucose. Or there are a few other monomers of carbohydrates. Glucose is the one that we typically talk about. So this means chewing is going to mechanically digest your food, and saliva and that salivary amylase are going to chemically digest your food, and all of that is taking place within the oral cavity. Here you can see the location of those salivary glands. You have the parotid gland, again that is in front of and slightly below your ear, and then you have the submandibular gland, mandibular referring to the mandible, your jawbone, and the sublingual gland, lingual referring to your tongue, so just below your tongue. Then the pharynx, remember that the pharynx is a part of both the respiratory and the digestive system. Within the pharynx, you're going to have the epiglottis, a flap of tissue that's going to prevent you from having food go down the wrong pipe, essentially. And when you do have food go down the wrong pipe, is because that epiglottis has closed over a part of food that tried to go down your trachea. That's what I just said there. When the epiglottis traps a bolus, it prevents it from going down to the lungs, but you're also choking on it because it's trying to go down your trachea. Usually what happens is you're going to cough. That's going to force the food back up into the oral cavity, or at least into your oropharynx, and then you're going to swallow it, and hopefully the second time you swallow it correctly. There is no digestion that takes place in the pharynx. There's no mechanical digestion, no chemical digestion taking place in this location. Here we'll see if this link works. You can take a look at the process of swallowing. Here's your epiglottis that's going to close over the trachea to ensure that the bolus moves down your esophagus, which will be the next part of the alimentary canal that we are headed to and that we will be covering in the next video. So overall here you can see everything that we talked about: the hard palate, the soft palate. Here, hard palate because of this bone, the soft palate, you get the uvula dangling from it. You have your tongue and everything in the oral cavity here. Teeth will be located here. And here you can see where the epiglottis sits and how it's going to cover your glottis actually to prevent food from going down your trachea so that it correctly goes down your esophagus on its way down here to the stomach. So that is the oral cavity. If you have any questions, make sure you're asking either in class or on the updates tab. But we'll be moving on through the rest of the alimentary canal in future videos.